So now that we've pretty much established ourselves as a rival of the USSR, and we're, very paranoid, and they're very paranoid, all this stuff in Berlin is going on, all this craziness is happening, we're going to start trying to protect ourselves, and that's going to happen with creating alliances and deepening the divide between us and the Soviet Union. So we're going to start this in 1949. We're going to get together with 11 other countries to form an organization called NATO. It stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So we come together with Belgium, Great Britain, Canada, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, and Portugal, and sign a contract basically saying that if one of us is ever attacked, it would be taken as an attack on all the countries involved. And it's basically going to operate like a club that the Soviet Union can't join. It's like an anti-communism club. Now, why do we form and join this anti-communism club? Well, there's two reasons. Number one is the communist takeover of China. In 1949, communist leader Mao Zedong led a successful rebellion and takeover from the previous nationalist government that was led by a guy named Chiang Kai-shek that was supported by the United States. So there's no longer this anchor of democracy in Asia. We only have really powerful countries in Asia are all communist by this point. So communist domination of Asia can keep spreading. It's much more likely. The second reason is that on September 23rd of 1949, we have detected that the Soviet Union has developed nuclear weapons. And this means that we no longer have any type of weapon that the Soviet Union doesn't also have access to, which makes the possibility of nuclear warfare much higher. So from this point on, we're going to be in an arms race with the USSR, each of us fearing that if we had the smaller number of nuclear weapons, we would be more vulnerable to an attack. Now, the Soviet Union doesn't want to be without allies. So in 1955, they're going to form a protective alliance against the Western European powers called the Warsaw Pact. And the USSR basically forces all of their satellite states and puppet governments to join. So it's Russia, as well as Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Hungary, Poland, and Romania. And so, like I said, this is going to be called the Warsaw Pact. So now, just as we saw in the beginning of World War I and World War II, the entire world has been eventually divided into two mega powerful alliance groups. And we're just going to keep making that worse by forming more and more alliances. We don't want to be outdone, right? We don't want Russia to have like the same thing as us. So we're going to create more alliance groups. We're going to create CETA, which is the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, which will be us, Great Britain, France, Pakistan, Thailand, the Philippines, Australia, and New Zealand, trying to curb Soviet aggression in the East. And then we're also going to form CENTO, which is the Central Treaty Organization, with Turkey, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, Great Britain, and us, to prevent the USSR from expanding its reach any further south. So by the mid-1950s, we are aligned militarily with 42 different countries around the world, which is absolutely insane. So the next big thing here in the beginning of the Cold War is going to be the Korean War. So Korea has a very interesting history. They've been invaded over 1,000 times. Actually, that's a real number. I'm not just exaggerating. They've actually been invaded over 1,000 times by different countries throughout history. And because of that, they have a really difficult past. They're very wary of outside influence. And the last time they were invaded was 1910, when Japan actually annexed North Korea. So once Japan was defeated in World War II, Korea was divided at the 38th parallel, and the North was placed under the control of the Soviet Union, and then the South formed a republic in 1948 with the help of the United States. And now the guy who was running the show in the North was a guy named Kim Il-sung, and in June 25th of 1950, he invaded South Korea with North Korean troops. Now, the Soviet Union did support the invasion of South Korea, but North Korea is primarily going to be backed by China. So now it's up to the UN to step in and handle this, right? So the UN does unanimously vote to send troops to to South Korea to help them. Now, today the UN has their own sort of like army, but back then they were so new that they had to like borrow troops from the countries involved. So this is not a war between the United States and North Korea. This is a war between North Korea and South Korea. The United States will be sending troops to help South Korea under the command of the United Nations. So without the approval of Congress and without a war declaration, President Truman sends American troops to South Korea, and he sends a fleet to help Taiwan, sort of like hold down Taiwan so that all of this doesn't expand there as well, since it's right next door. Now, General Douglas MacArthur, remember, he had been the supreme Allied commander of Asia during World War II, and he's still stationed there after the war. He led his troops to roll back the communist invasion all the way back to the original border, which was the 38th parallel. So the U.S. ordered a full invasion of the North, not expecting China to come to the rescue of the North, but that did happen, and 1 million Chinese troops landed in Korea and pushed the UN troops all the way back to the 38th parallel again. So MacArthur demanded that Truman establish a blockade against China, and that he helped Chiang Kai-shek, the old leader of China, take back power, basically stage another revolution in China. And he also suggested that maybe we use atomic bombs on China or North Korea if it's necessary. Now, the United States was worried that if we acted too crazy, that the Soviet Union might get involved and make this like into a full-blown hot war, no longer a Cold War. So he wanted MacArthur to focus his troops on just protecting the Republic. So he goes off in the press about Truman, and then after that he writes a letter to a congressman from Massachusetts saying that, we have to win. There's no substitute for victory. And he starts basically asking Congress to institute policies that would go around what Truman's orders were, and this is just absolutely unacceptable, a huge undermining of authority for President Truman. So Truman basically has no choice but to fire Douglas MacArthur, and he basically says, I could do nothing else and still be president of the United States. And what he means is, I can't make any other move here and still call myself the president of the United States. If I'm going to be the leader of the free world, then I need to act like it, and I need to hold up my authority. And when someone who's supposed to be my subordinate is challenging me, I can't have that. So by this time, Americans are really restless with our involvement in Korea because nothing seemed to be happening. So in 1952, there was a new election. Truman was not running again, but there was another Democrat running. And then the Republicans nominated Dwight D. Eisenhower. And Eisenhower said in his campaign that once he was elected, he would work for an early and honorable end to the war. And overwhelmingly, people took hold of that. His campaign slogan was, "We like Ike." And they really, really did. He got 90% of the electoral votes that November. And 6 months into his presidency, he traveled to Korea to start working for an end. So on July 27th of 1953, the United States, North Korea, South Korea, and China all signed an armistice. Now, why do we not need to sign a treaty? Because it's not a war. We didn't declare war on anyone. Technically, this is what we would call a police action. So once again, we agree that the border is going between the two Koreas will be at the 38th parallel, and that is where the border remains to this day. So overall, 54,000 American soldiers were killed during the Korean War, and the United States is all in all involved in this for a little over 3 years. Because of this, our military budget also is going to exponentially grow because of this. At the start of 1950, our defense budget is going to end up being a third of the entire federal budget, which is really massive because we are basically like we're almost at like DEFCON 1. We're just like very paranoid about our safety and the safety of our allies in terms of communism and the Soviet Union and China. So by the end of Truman's presidency, many Americans aren't happy with him or the Korean War. They felt that we lost millions of dollars and thousands of lives to only end up exactly where we started, which was the 38th parallel, which is sort of true. But we are successful in protecting South Korea, and South Korea is still even today, a very westernized and successful country. They do really great. I actually have a friend who lives in South Korea, and she absolutely loves it. North Korea, on the other hand, as you know, if you've paid any attention to the news at all, they're currently under the third Kim. So first it was Kim Il-sung, the guy who led the communist revolution, then Kim Jong-il, then Kim Jong-un, who's the current totalitarian dictator of North Korea. And after the Korean War, the Korean people in the North basically they like establish this bubble around themselves, and because of that, they don't let anything in and nothing out, and we know so little about them, which is why a lot of people find them so interesting. They don't have internet there. It's just a very isolated and secluded place, and they really harbor so many negative feelings to the United States. They actually teach in schools that the United States forced South Korea to first invade North Korea, which we actually know isn't true because we have proof, we have documentation from both China and the Soviet Union, who was North Korea's allies at the time, that North Korea invaded South Korea first, but that's not how they teach it in South Korea. So like the government, everything is propaganda in North Korea. It's just a very, very odd and interesting place, and I definitely recommend if you're interested in North Korea at all and like what it's like now, that you watch a documentary called The Propaganda Game. It is on Netflix at this moment. Who knows if it'll be on Netflix by the time you listen to this video or hear about it. But it's a great documentary, and it's really shows it's very good at showing how North Korea sees the United States and how the United States sees North Korea. It's just very interesting. It gives a lot more updated information on the current situation in North Korea.